So next up, we're going to talk about the playoff bracket and whether the system is flawed or not, which I think we both agree it is. And then also the roads these teams have to take to get to the championship game. Who has the easiest road? Who do we like early on? I know the games are about almost 2 weeks out basically, but I think it's going to be interesting and a fun playoff. Let's share this real quick.
Just 10 days till the first one, 11 till the other 3.
That's true. So when this came out, Matt, what was your first opinion on it?
So my first opinion, what's interesting is so many people were going to Twitter like that day of like the committee, absolute colossal failure, all this. And I think it's like, did you not know the rules? Like we already knew the bracket was going to be messed up. I felt like I had no real problems with the rankings. It seemed like everything was like logical based like Ohio State should be ahead of Tennessee. Like I think there's a conversation we had about, where Penn State and Texas versus Notre Dame should be. But like, I don't think there's any like egregious errors in terms of where they rank teams. And then, if you're going to have the 9th ranked team in your rankings as the 3 seed and the 12th ranked team in your rankings as the 4 seed, then it's going to start to get really jacked up. So I guess a lot of people just weren't ready to see it like finalized and like, oh wow, this is terrible. Like we kind of knew this was what it was going to be for like weeks now, right? Like especially the Boise State thing, that wasn't even new. Like them getting a bye has been the case for like the last 3 or 4 weeks. So that was my first take, is I didn't really understand the outrage. Are you with me there?
Oh, 100%. It was funny who I was hearing it from too. Like I respect Joel Klatt, but that was like one of his tweets. He was like, I'm outraged with the committee and what they did. I'm like, brother, you should have known at the beginning of this that something was going to be screwed up because they had guardrails. They couldn't do what they wanted to do. They had to do it a certain way. So I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that is weird is I don't know how you rank SMU ahead of Clemson with 11-12. Like, because my buddy, Alabama buddy, just kind of texted me while it was happening, because they kind of previewed like the rank, like, and threw Clemson down there at the bottom. So you're like, okay, we're kind of filling in the slots here. And he was like, well, if the team is ahead of Clemson, it has to be Alabama. And he like sold me. I'm like, oh, I bet you're right. Yeah, you can't put SMU ahead of Clemson. And then they did it at the end. So that's the one thing that's a little weird to me. But I guess SMU Texas, that'd be a great matchup too, right? You get that Lone Star showdown. But yeah, that in terms of like the seeds, that's the one thing. But then you look at the actual road that teams have, and I think I will say there's 2 things can be true, right? If you're a Georgia fan, I think this is the perfect, like you couldn't have hand selected a better bracket to get, especially if you don't have your starting quarterback for this. But this idea that it's like the bracket is a complete like failure because the Oregon side of it is so difficult. I think a huge part of that is just our brand bias. It's like we all think Ohio State is maybe the best team in the Big Ten, but by definition, they're the 3rd team in the Big Ten. Like we think some people think Texas is the best team in college football, but they did lose 2 games. And so they're sitting out the 5 seed. Like, so it's just some of these brands, especially at Tennessee too. Like everyone talks about Nico and the 5-star. And even though the offense has still not really become that, it's like people are ready for Tennessee to be that. So I think it's like the brand, and maybe Clemson affects that too because they've won multiple national championships. But I think the brands on Oregon's side of the bracket have people thinking like, oh, this is just totally lopsided. But I don't necessarily disagree with how the teams are slotted, if that makes sense.
No, I don't disagree with how they're slotted either. There was some weird, I forget what the combination was, but I saw someone ranked Notre Dame ahead of Texas, but then Penn State behind Texas. Like it was weird. And you can't have Notre Dame at the 5 seed because 1, they didn't play in a championship game, and 2, their one loss was to NIU. You can't reward someone losing to NIU, who is an average MAC team, and put them at the 5 seed. So I would have been fine with Penn State if they were 5 ahead of us and Texas 6. But to me, I completely agree with the committee putting Notre Dame 7. I don't understand why people would even argue that, honestly. I actually think the easiest road is 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so bad. And think about it. Then you would be punishing Texas and Penn State for making the conference championship game. And both those games were competitive. It's not like either of those teams got blown out. They lost by one score. One of them lost in overtime. So that didn't make any sense to me if they did drop below Notre Dame. And I think Penn State ended up with the easiest draw. Like you have SMU on your home campus, which is going to be a freezing cold day, most likely in Pennsylvania, which SMU, I don't know if any of those guys have ever played in cold weather because Dallas doesn't really get very cold down in Texas. And they don't really travel up until this point. Any cold place that I believe I'd have to look. I know Texas does. Texas has played in Iowa State, which has been like 20 degrees at times in November and stuff of that nature. I don't know if SMU does that, but it's going to be interesting. And then you get to play Boise State and you get to be your best part of your defense is your running defense, and you get to face them with the running back. And no offense to Mattis Maxon or Mad Dog Maxon, he's not very good at throwing. I think he had a completion percentage in the championship game versus UNLV of like 48% or something like that. So Penn State's got a road to the Final Four for sure.
Yeah, shout out to Maddox though. That's mine and my wife's one of our dogs' name Maddox. She's a Cubs fan. I'm a Braves fan, so it works. So do you see the whole family's name? It's like McGuire and like named after like Willie Mays, one kid, and one's named after like Mickey Mantle. The whole family. I don't know. I'm a sports guy, but let's pump the brakes a little bit. But yeah, I saw someone break down like what you would have because I'm big on the rematches personally. Like I really want to try to minimize the rematches. So I love that Georgia and Texas are on opposite ends. Like if they meet again, it's for a national championship. Like Ohio State, Oregon, you could potentially get that second round. So there's only so much you can do at times with this. But I think if you had a normal bracket, you could have avoided some of these rematches because I saw this a inverted bracket of not doing the automatic qualifiers, and it had Oregon as the 1 seed facing the winner of 8-9 Indiana, Boise State. Then Texas as the 4 seed facing the winner of 5-12 Penn State, Clemson. Georgia's the 2 seed facing the winner of 7-10 Tennessee, SMU. And then Notre Dame as a 3 seed facing the winner of Ohio State, Arizona State. And it's like that would be just a perfect college football bracket, you know? And it's like this 12 teams, the fact that they did throw Arizona State and Boise State, and I'm all here for the automatic qualifiers, but throwing Boise State and Arizona State with first round buys, it totally, I'm also an underdog guy. And I think most of America is an underdog guy. It changes the underdog dynamic. Now I find myself rooting against Boise State. And like, I find myself rooting against Ashton Genty. I'm like, look, he's had a great season. We can't give a guy the Heisman for doing this in the Mountain West. Like, I'm sorry. That's just my take. Like, I just, there's something about Boise State now. I'm like, if Penn State comes in there and routes them, like I'll be kind of happy about that. And it's like, that's not how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be rooting for the underdog.
No, 100%. If you had to, based on like underdog status and everything, if you had to rank which underdog pulls off the upset, how would you rank those?
Let's see. So that would be Indiana, SMU, Tennessee, and Clemson.
Yes.
The Tennessee, Ohio State, that feels like the cop out 9-8. It's like when people say they picked an upset in the NCAA tournament bracket, they took the 9-8. Tennessee is definitely I'm not sure how to feel about that matchup because those teams are kind of built similarly. So I think Tennessee could have a good shot there. But Notre Dame is one, or Indiana, I should say. Notre Dame, I just don't have really an idea of how good they are. Like they've just, after losing to Northern Illinois, they started smashing teams, but Indiana's basically done the same thing the whole year too. They've been smashing a bunch of inferior teams. So those teams have essentially identical resumes, but Indiana lost to Ohio State and Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. So I don't know that Notre Dame is really a better team than Indiana. And it's also, I wonder how the obviously it's a big game for both teams, but I wonder about the dynamic and just like who wants it more type stuff because they haven't played since 1991. And before that, they hadn't played since like the 50s. So, Notre Dame thinks they're on a whole nother level than Indiana. They don't have to play them. It's a Georgia State type of different level to them. So Indiana's definitely going to come in there with a chip on their shoulder. And we've seen Coach Signetti and the swagger they've had all season. I think they've been waiting because everyone basically wrote them off after the Ohio State game and probably hasn't even watched their game since then. So I think they're kind of, just kind of under the radar here, and they're a really dangerous team.
No, I agree with that. I think this playoff bracket is all about styles make fights, and I think Indiana style mixed with Notre Dame style. Notre Dame isn't an explosive offensive team through the air, and to me, that's how you beat Indiana or blow them out at least. I think this is going to be a close football game. I don't know if they cover, but I do think it's within 10 points. I'm pretty confident saying that. I think the biggest mismatch is SMU Penn State. I was surprised Texas was favored by I think 11.5 over Clemson. Like, I think we're better in Clemson. I think if we play to our upper echelon capabilities, I think we beat them by 2 touchdowns. But do we do that? No, we never do that. Like, we should have taken a hold of the Georgia game in the first half, and it was 6-3. So we don't do that. So I think that'll be closer than I expect it to be, or it should be. And it's going to be fun either way. Like, these are good matchups. I don't really care what I've seen people say, oh, it's going to be blowouts. I really don't think most of these games are going to be blowouts. I think Tennessee, Ohio State will be a close game. I think Clemson and Texas will be a close game for most of the game. And I think Indiana and Notre Dame will be a close game. I think the only possibility I see SMU beating Penn State is if Kevin Jennings just goes off. If he goes off, they have a chance because he's a really special player. He's a really good football player.
Yeah. And after last week, and now obviously it's Oregon. So, that's a team that scored a lot of points against them. But now I feel like I haven't even seen Penn State get in a shootout like that. So I'm like, oh, Penn State might play a game that's a shootout. I just expect every game Penn State plays to be in the teens, and then the first 1 to 20 wins. I'm with you. I think Texas, Ohio State feels like kind of the sexiest matchup of the 4. But Clemson Tech, did I say Ohio State, Tennessee? Did I say that wrong?
You said Ohio State, Texas. I know what you meant, though.
Oh, yeah, Ohio State, Tennessee. Clemson, Texas is like a low key, because I've kind of questioned Texas throughout the year, just only because of the strength of schedule. And so Clemson is right there that, like, yeah, they've basically, I think the only 3 like top, I think 40 teams they played in, like, according to ESPN's FBI, were Georgia, South Carolina, and Louisville. And they lost all of those games. And then obviously they beat SMU. So that was their best win of the season. But for the most part, they basically lost to all the best teams they played. And Texas is one of those. They went 11-1, obviously, in the regular season. But Texas A&M is really the only good win of their, I would say, to this point in the season. Would you agree with that? Michigan, it's a good win. I'm not going to disrespect their whole schedule, but in terms of currently ranked teams, they don't have a win over a currently ranked team. Is that right?
No, that's right.
So that's why I'm like, there's still part of me that doesn't know what Texas is made of. And you Georgia kind of dealt with this a little bit. I don't know how you could probably, give me more of the inside knowledge on Texas, but Georgia kind of dealt with this going into 2021 after losing the SEC championship with Stetson and playing Michigan in that opener of, like, half the fan base didn't want Stetson to start that game. And with what Ewers is a really good quarterback, it's not like the JT Daniels, like Stetson of 2021, like, I would say Ewers has been better than that, but there's just so many people that want to see Arch Manning and the dynamic he brings to the field. Like, I wonder, like, kind of how that contributes to Texas.
No, I agree. I'd say this fan base is 50-50 split. My opinion on that is, if his name was Arch Wells, would anyone be calling for Quinn Ewers' job?
Yeah,
probably not. So that's my issue with it, is he's only Arch Manning, so that's why he called for his job. And I definitely question, like, the national media, because they're just going on with that for a story. Let's be honest here. They haven't sat down and watched Arch Manning's film versus ULM and Mississippi State. He was okay in both those games. He wasn't great in either one of those games, and he does not understand the offense. Now, do I think he should be utilized more? Absolutely. He should be utilized in the red zone because he's a really good athlete, and he can still throw. People forget, still has a really strong arm. And Texas, at this point, we have to try something in the red zone. I talked about this on my live show yesterday with Texas. So I don't count Steve Sarkisian's first year. I really don't count any coach's first year. It's whatever. So I went from second year, 13th in red zone scoring offense. Last year, we were 89th in red zone scoring offense. Iowa, for example, was 90th. So we were one spot better than Iowa. This year, we are 106th in red zone scoring offense. So this isn't a quarterback situation. This isn't an offense situation. This is a Steve Sarkisian play calling situation because he struggled with this with the Falcons. So in my opinion, Put Arch out there in the red zone. Let him go to work. I think Ewers moves the ball beautifully. Between the 20s, we move the ball pretty easily versus everyone we face. The perfect example of this is 6 quarters versus Georgia and A&M, which Georgia's a fantastic defense. A&M still a pretty good defense. We have over 600 yards of offense, and we've scored 16 points. Think about that. 600 yards of offense and we scored 16 points. Texas moves the ball, and that's what's holding Texas back. If they start scoring in the red zone, that does, in my opinion, make them the best team in college football. Will they do that? Probably not, because they haven't done it for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that argument. I just, at the end of the day, I feel like I still trust Steve Sarkisian more than all of us, right? Like, you've seen it's become such a popular talking point since that game of just, why was Arch Manning not there making an impact? And it's like, well, he did get like 2 series against Georgia the last time, and he wasn't just like tearing it up or anything. Like, when you were like, Texas was moving the ball a lot in that game. Like, I don't know who I put that game on if I'm a Texas fan, but I don't feel like I put it on Quinn Ewers. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's me. Like, it felt like I actually tracked the plays in that game, and 40% of the plays in that game were either for Texas offense were either a 10+ yard gain or a negative play. Like, it was just, they were either picking up 15, 20, 30 yards, or Georgia was getting a sack and they were losing 7, or they were just getting shut down on the run game. Like, it was a very odd game. They didn't run the ball at all either. So, or didn't run the ball well, I should say. So, like, Quinn Ewers, I don't know how you watch that game and just think Quinn Ewers is the problem. Like, that's just me. I guess I'm just not usually the guy that overreacts and like wants to blame everything on the quarterback.
No, you and I are on the same page. Quinn Ewers to me is like 3rd or 4th on the list of who I blame. I thought Sark's play calling in that game was pretty bad in certain situations. Like, Georgia, the screen and long timing plays do not work. You can't run those double fake reverse screen type stuff. That doesn't work versus Georgia. They're way too disciplined and way too athletic, especially when they play good teams. When they are locked in, they are disciplined and athletic. It does not work. Guess what was working? When we dropped back to pass and stretched them vertically, we were hitting them for chunk plays. And I don't know why we just went away from that. And then outside zone, you can't run it versus them. You either get a holding penalty or they're just so fast they run it down too easily from the backside. So you can't run that versus them. And then number 2 to me is Bert Auburn. Like, you cannot miss the 42-yard field goal. Like, if we make that, the game's over. We would have won the football game. And you especially can't penalties. That would be the third thing. You got a false start to put Bert Auburn in the position after you already made a 39-yard field goal to kick a 42-yard field goal and lose. So there's so many little things, but this has been the story of Texas. Like, if anyone watched that A&M game, it's 17-7. Texas should have won that game 31-0. They dominated that football game. A&M had one drive the whole game, and it was 17-7. So that's just the story of Texas this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. In Sarkisian, in Texas defense, it's like we hadn't seen that. They're essentially the only team that's seen that Georgia defense like all year long. The first time they played and the second time they played. So I imagine with how Texas have been running the ball the last few weeks, you think how Georgia's been giving up yards through the on the ground the last few weeks, you would have thought that was an advantage Texas would have in this game. And I don't know. I think it's something about Kirby Smart. Maybe he's playing coy at times in the season, but it seems like in the big games, like when the defense has had struggles, like they have something dialed up in the big games, and like they come ready to play at a different level. But it's insane. I'm not really sure what to expect. It's with what this Georgia, if you would have told me like 3 or 4 weeks ago that Georgia was going to win the SEC, like I probably right after that Ole Miss win or Ole Miss loss, I probably would not have believed you. Like, this team was just not looking very good at all. And then Carson Beck gets hurt, and like Gunnar Stockton just made some plays, didn't play great, but just made enough plays to win the game. But yeah, it was an insane performance, and I'm not even sure what to expect of Georgia now in the 12-team playoff, even though they are coming off like their best win of the season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So real quick, because Matt does have to go to do the Georgia show at 8. I need your Final Four prediction real quick, Matt.
Oh man, Final Four prediction. We got to do this on the spot. This is subject to change. I may change my mind, but right now, I think the Final Four. Oh man, this isn't going to be creative. I'm going to be right there with everyone else. I'm sure, but right now, to me, it looks like Oregon, Texas, Georgia, and Penn State.
Okay. I'm going to go Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, and I'm going to go Penn State. That'd be my Final Four right now. And I agree. I'd subject to change. The closer I get, the better my predictions get. Right now, this is just totally a gut feeling. I have not looked at these matchups close enough. But that's my Final Four prediction right now.
Yeah, I could see it. I think Ohio State, of all the teams playing in that first round, Ohio State feels like definitely one of the stronger contenders to get to the Final Four.
Yeah, for sure.